Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. Ethan Blackwood stood behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of his high-rise office, the city stretching beneath him like a kingdom he believed he ruled. The Blackwood name carried weight in elite circles, old money, polished reputation, generations of power, but beneath the surface, the empire was quietly bleeding. Loans masked as investments, debts hidden behind glossy balance sheets, and obligations buried so deep even Ethan chose not to look too closely. He had grown up believing the world belonged to him, that privilege was inheritance, not responsibility. That belief shaped every decision he made, including the one forming coldly in his mind that morning. His gaze shifted from the skyline to his reflection in the glass. The tailored suit, the luxury watch, the aura of dominance, everything about him screamed success. And yet, his thoughts were elsewhere. Lena. Glamorous, ambitious, intoxicating. She represented everything Ethan craved now: admiration without expectation, beauty without responsibility, desire without consequence. Beside her, Amelia felt invisible to him. Pregnant, quiet, grounded, she had become, in his mind, a reminder of obligations he no longer wished to carry. He returned to his desk, fingers tapping impatiently against polished wood. The thought settled fully now, no longer a whisper but a decision. Divorce. Clean. Final. Amelia had become a weight, he told himself. Emotional. Dependent. Weak. He convinced himself she needed him far more than he needed her, that without his name and resources she would crumble. Pregnancy, in his eyes, had stripped her of value, not added to it. He ignored the reality that she had never asked for extravagance, never clung to his status, never depended on him the way he assumed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a faint smile forming as he imagined a future unburdened by vows and expectations. He felt powerful, untouchable, certain that everything he owned was the result of his own brilliance. The contracts on his desk, the empire behind his name, the authority he wielded, it all felt permanent. He did not know that his confidence rested on foundations he did not control, that the power he believed was his had been quietly signed away long before. As sunlight flooded the office, Ethan Blackwood finalized his cold resolve, completely unaware that the very woman he was preparing to discard held the unseen strings of the world he thought he owned. Amelia sat by the tall arched window in their penthouse, the soft morning light falling across her calm face and gently rounded belly. Every breath she took reminded her of the life growing within her, a life she cherished above all else. She had long learned the art of quiet observation, the subtle ways of reading a person without revealing her own thoughts, and now, as she sensed Ethan's growing distance and cold calculation, she applied that same skill to his moods. She felt the tension in the apartment, the unspoken decisions, and the faint aroma of his obsession with appearances, yet she made no outward sign of worry or despair. Her calm was not naivety, it was strength measured and deliberate, an armor forged from understanding the fragility of those who relied on her composure. Despite the emotional turbulence brewing in Ethan's mind, Amelia maintained grace and restraint. She moved deliberately through their home, tending to her small routines with quiet dignity. The apartment's luxury held little meaning for her, she never flaunted it, never indulged in excess, never allowed the trappings of wealth to define her. Her intelligence was understated but potent, she read contracts, understood business nuances, and anticipated human motives. To anyone observing superficially, she might appear delicate, even passive, but beneath the surface was a mind capable of calculating far beyond what Ethan imagined. Amelia's mysterious background lent her an air of quiet authority. She never interfered in Ethan's business or social life, never demanded acknowledgement for her contributions or insights, and never sought to overshadow his ego. Yet there were subtle clues, an absent flicker of recognition at certain decisions, a knowing smile when discussing finances, that hinted she understood far more than she let on. Even as Ethan planned her dismissal from his life, she quietly monitored, noting every flaw in his assumptions, every sign of vulnerability. All the while, the weight of pregnancy bore down on her, both physically and emotionally. She felt the isolation acutely, knowing that the man who should have protected and cherished her now viewed her as a burden. Yet she did not collapse under the pressure. Instead, Amelia embraced the duality of life and abandonment, carrying not only her child but also her resolve. Her heart ached, but her mind was clear. She would face the coming storm with composure, and when the moment came, her strength would reveal truths Ethan could never have anticipated. Lena glided into the high-rise lobby with the confidence of someone who believed the world already belonged to her. Every movement was deliberate, every smile calculated to captivate and ensnare. She had long recognized Ethan's arrogance and hunger for status, and she knew precisely how to exploit it. In her mind, she was not merely a companion, she was his upgrade, the embodiment of ambition, beauty, and sophistication that could replace a woman she deemed ordinary. Every glance, every word whispered in his ear, was crafted to reinforce his perception that she was essential to his success, the missing piece he had always sought. Ethan, blinded by desire and pride, drank in her attention as though it were nourishment. Lena's subtle manipulations played on his vanity and insecurities, making him believe he had discovered a prize while underestimating the quiet power of the woman he was about to discard. She whispered praise, feigned admiration for his decisions, and allowed him to imagine a future where her presence elevated him socially, financially, and emotionally. Her influence was intoxicating. In her eyes, Ethan was both powerful and grateful, unaware of the strings she had gently wrapped around his ego. In private moments, Lena's fantasies stretched beyond mere companionship. She imagined herself seated at the head of the Blackwood family table, orchestrating decisions, shaping the empire according to her will. She envisioned wealth bending to her desires, power yielding in her hands, and respect flowing automatically from those who had once revered Ethan. Her mind conjured a world where she was untouchable, admired, and feared, not just a mistress, but the queen of a legacy she barely understood. Yet, despite her arrogance, subtle cracks hinted at future vulnerability. Lena's hunger for recognition and impatience for instant gratification occasionally led her to careless remarks, small displays of greed, and moments of overreach. These fleeting missteps, though unnoticed by Ethan, foreshadowed the downfall that would come when ambition collided with the quiet strength of a woman far more powerful than she imagined. Her audacity shone brightly against Amelia's understated composure. Where Lena flaunted her desire for status, Amelia's calm intelligence and restraint remained invisible to the world, but all the more dangerous. It was only a matter of time before Lena's illusions collided with the reality she had underestimated entirely. The courtroom buzzed with muted conversations as the Blackwood name hung heavily in the air. Cameras flashed discreetly, recording every detail for society pages and online gossip columns. Ethan Blackwood, immaculate in his tailored suit and perfectly polished shoes, sat with an air of smug satisfaction. Across from him, Amelia entered quietly, her poise intact, her growing belly wrapped in a simple but elegant dress that accentuated both her dignity and her quiet strength. She knew all eyes were on her, and she embraced the scrutiny with grace, aware that every whisper and judgment carried not just curiosity but expectation. As the proceedings began, whispers rippled through the high society crowd. Some expressed fake sympathy for the pregnant wife, others indulged in silent judgment, delighting in the drama of a marriage undone. Yet beneath the polite veneer, a subtle outrage simmered. How could a man of Ethan's supposed stature abandon a woman carrying his child? Cameras captured every glance, every controlled gesture, every micro-expression, feeding a narrative that society could not resist. Ethan laid out his reasoning with cold precision, citing incompatibility, lifestyle differences, and a sense that Amelia no longer suited the image he desired for himself. His words were calculated, rehearsed, designed to justify his decision in the public eye. He expected shock, maybe anger, possibly tears, but not the calm dignity that Amelia displayed. She did not beg, she did not argue, she did not plead for consideration or delay. Instead, she signed the papers with deliberate care, her signature a quiet testament to her strength. Every stroke of the pen was controlled, measured, and devoid of desperation. To Ethan, her composure seemed almost like defeat. He leaned back slightly, imagining the relief and triumph he would feel once the divorce was finalized. He believed he had stripped her of status, power, and influence, convinced she would vanish from the social and financial spheres that mattered to him. In reality, Amelia's calm was far from weakness. It was strategy, restraint, and observation, qualities Ethan could not perceive through the lens of his arrogance. Once the documents were signed, Amelia rose slowly, her movements precise, her head held high. She walked out of the courtroom with nothing that was visible to the public, no jewels, no fanfare, no apparent resources. Yet beneath the surface, she carried far more than Ethan could imagine: knowledge, intelligence, patience, and a secret power that would soon upend everything he had believed to be his. She left silently, unassuming, but with a resolve that promised a reckoning far greater than anyone in that room could foresee. Beneath the calm exterior that Amelia displayed for the world, a secret power lay quietly in her hands. Few could have guessed that the woman Ethan had dismissed so casually was, in reality, a self-made billionaire heiress. Her fortune was not inherited from the Blackwood family, nor was it tied to her husband's name or reputation. Over the years, Amelia had quietly built multiple holding companies across industries ranging from technology to real estate, each structured with meticulous legal and financial safeguards. She never flaunted her wealth, never let it define her identity, and never sought recognition in social circles. Amelia had chosen secrecy for reasons both practical and deeply personal. She wanted to ensure that anyone in her life valued her for who she was, not for what she owned. Concealing her fortune allowed her to test loyalty, to see who would love her without the influence of power, and to avoid the inevitable exploitation that accompanied great wealth. Independence was her shield, and intelligence her armor. She had no desire to be anyone's puppet or trophy, especially not Ethan's. Her calm composure, the elegance that he misread as weakness, was in fact the product of strategic patience, observation, and self-assured strength. The revelation of her hidden legacy began to take form behind the scenes. One of Amelia's private corporations, discreetly acquired years before, held the majority stake in the Blackwood family empire. Every decision Ethan had believed he controlled, every boardroom meeting where he flexed authority, was now subtly influenced by her ownership. The audience, reading or watching the unfolding story, would grasp the irony long before Ethan himself. His arrogance, his dismissal of Amelia, and his indulgence in fleeting pleasures were blind to the quiet yet absolute control she wielded. This dramatic irony built tension in the narrative. Ethan believed he had stripped Amelia of power, yet in truth, she had silently orchestrated the framework that would soon upend his life entirely. Every confident step he took, every smug smile he offered Lena, was a march toward his own undoing, guided unknowingly by the very woman he had underestimated. Amelia's secrecy was not deceit born of malice, but strategy born of wisdom, patience, and an unshakable understanding of human nature, a combination that would soon prove fatal to Ethan's assumptions and ambitions. The first hint of upheaval came subtly, almost imperceptibly. Amelia, seated in her private office, tapped a sequence of encrypted codes into her secure network, signaling her legal and financial teams to initiate carefully orchestrated moves. Across multiple jurisdictions, contracts were quietly amended, loans that had long kept the Blackwood family empire afloat were recalled, and boardroom agendas shifted without Ethan's knowledge. Everything was designed to appear coincidental, a series of unfortunate events rather than the precise machinations of a woman he had underestimated. Ethan's initial meetings with his executive team were routine, but as days passed, tensions began to ripple through the company. Contracts he had taken for granted seemed to carry hidden clauses, loan approvals stalled inexplicably, and once loyal advisors began questioning decisions he thought were final. He demanded explanations, citing his decades of experience and leadership, but answers were vague, legal jargon masking truths he could not immediately discern. Authority that had always felt absolute now seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. At first, Ethan shrugged it off, assuming minor administrative errors or delays caused the confusion. But as the disruptions intensified, he felt a growing unease. Board meetings became arenas of subtle rebellion, colleagues exchanged knowing glances behind his back. He struggled to assert dominance, issuing directives that went ignored or were implemented incorrectly. The empire he had believed was a monument to his prowess suddenly appeared fragile, unstable, and beyond his comprehension. In private, Lena noticed the change with alarm. She had always viewed Ethan's confidence as invincible, his ego untouchable. Now, as he grew increasingly frustrated, pacing offices and speaking through clenched teeth, she urged him to take aggressive action. "You can't let them undermine you," she whispered, her tone laced with both ambition and panic. "Fight back. Show them who's in charge." But Lena did not understand that the hand guiding these moves was not a rebellious board member, nor a competitor, it was Amelia. Every move she made was calculated to undermine Ethan's control without ever appearing overt. Ethan's irritation grew alongside his confusion, a combustible mix of ego and fear. He lashed out at employees, snapped at colleagues, and even questioned Lena's advice, frustrated that nothing seemed to restore order. Meanwhile, Amelia's presence was invisible, her influence felt only in the tension that hung over the company, in the subtle shifting of power that went unnoticed by the man who had thought he had conquered both marriage and empire. Each misstep, each faltering decision, carried him closer to the reckoning that had been silently orchestrated from the shadows, a reckoning he would soon be powerless to stop. The moment the first news articles hit, Ethan's carefully curated world began to tremble. Headlines hinted at instability within the Blackwood empire, investors expressed concern over sudden financial shifts, and whispers of mismanagement circulated through boardrooms and exclusive social clubs. Social media amplified every fragment, dissecting his every move, questioning his leadership, and subtly undermining the image of invincibility he had spent a lifetime cultivating. Family elders, once silent supporters, demanded explanations, their voices sharp and accusatory, challenging the authority Ethan had always assumed was unquestioned. Panic began to creep into Ethan's demeanor, replacing the pride and arrogance that had defined him for so long. Meetings that he once dominated now felt like trials. Every decision was second-guessed, every directive challenged, and the foundation of confidence he had relied upon started to crumble. Small cracks in his facade widened into fissures, and he found himself scrambling for answers, grasping at control that continually slipped through his fingers. He paced offices late into the night, fingers raking through his hair, muttering to himself in frustration. The empire he thought untouchable suddenly seemed fragile, its power dependent on forces he had ignored or underestimated. Lena, once poised and certain, began to sense the instability herself. The luxury, influence, and social dominance she had envisioned were slipping like sand through her fingers. Her smirk of confidence faded into subtle anxiety, her whispers to Ethan turning into frantic suggestions, each more desperate than the last. She realized, perhaps too late, that the illusions of power she had ridden on were fragile and that the man she had chosen to manipulate was no longer fully in command. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate quietly but persistently among the financial elite and society circles. A silent owner was controlling key decisions, influencing contracts, and shifting the balance of power without appearing in meetings or public statements. The mystery of this invisible force ignited speculation, unease, and a growing sense of inevitability. No one could pinpoint the source, but everyone felt its effects. Ethan's panic intensified with each passing day, his confidence dissolving under the weight of unseen authority, as the woman he had dismissed and underestimated continued to orchestrate the downfall of the empire he had believed to be his alone. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, whispers barely contained behind polished glass walls. Executives shifted uneasily in their seats, papers shuffled nervously, and Ethan Blackwood leaned back in his chair, forcing a confident smile he no longer felt. He had spent weeks scrambling to regain control, issuing directives, calling emergency meetings, and trying to assert dominance over a series of inexplicable setbacks. Nothing had worked. Now, he was determined to face whatever unknown force had destabilized his empire head-on. The door opened quietly, and all attention snapped toward it. Amelia stepped in. The room froze. She did not enter as a wronged wife seeking reconciliation or apology. She entered as a force of authority, poised, radiant, and undeniably powerful. Her pregnancy was visible, a subtle curve beneath her tailored jacket, yet it only seemed to enhance her presence, lending a gravity to her composure that none in the room had anticipated. Every step she took was deliberate, her gaze unwavering, and every movement communicated control, confidence, and unshakable authority. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief as she approached the head of the table, not as someone pleading or timid, but as the majority owner of the very company that controlled the Blackwood family empire. Shock rippled through the room, but Ethan could barely comprehend the revelation. The woman he had abandoned, dismissed, and thought powerless was in fact the architect of the empire he had always believed was his birthright. His arrogance, his entitlement, his belief that wealth and power were inseparable from his name, all crumbled in an instant. Lena, standing beside him, paled as the realization sank in. The glamour, manipulation, and calculated charm she had relied on to control Ethan and secure her place within the Blackwood world dissolved immediately. No boardroom, no investor, no contract could protect her now. She was exposed as powerless, a mere pawn in a game she had not understood she was playing. Her whispers of advice, her urgings to fight back, were revealed as futile, a desperate attempt to cling to a mirage of influence that Amelia had quietly dominated from the shadows. Amelia addressed the room with a voice both calm and commanding, outlining decisions, clarifying ownership, and enforcing legal authority with precision. Every word emphasized the absolute control she wielded, and Ethan felt a sinking horror as he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. He had divorced the woman who literally owned his legacy, discarded the one person whose intellect, foresight, and quiet strength had quietly orchestrated the empire he thought he ruled. The boardroom was electric with tension, eyes shifting between Ethan, Lena, and Amelia. The humiliation etched into Ethan's features was visible, a mixture of disbelief, regret, and dawning understanding. Lena's arrogance had collapsed under the weight of truth, while Amelia's quiet patience and hidden power had proven unstoppable. The man who had believed he was untouchable now faced the stark reality that his pride, greed, and misjudgment had delivered him into the hands of the very woman he had underestimated, and she was, undeniably, the one who controlled everything he had ever considered his own. Ethan's fall was swift and merciless. Within days, the reality of Amelia's ownership began to ripple through the Blackwood empire. Board members who once deferred to his authority now questioned every decision he made, implementing policies he had no power to override. Investors, alarmed by the sudden shifts and public revelations of mismanagement, began pulling out, withdrawing capital, and demanding answers that Ethan could no longer provide. The carefully constructed reputation he had cultivated over decades crumbled under scrutiny, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. His family, who had long relied on his supposed brilliance and stewardship of the empire, turned against him with cold pragmatism. Elders who once praised his judgment now condemned his recklessness and arrogance, blaming him for jeopardizing a legacy that extended far beyond his personal ambitions. Family gatherings became tense arenas of whispered accusations and pointed glances, and Ethan's previously unquestioned influence dissolved entirely. The pride that had driven him, the confidence that had blinded him, was replaced with shame and a growing awareness of irreversible mistakes. Lena, who had once thrived on his authority and the illusion of wealth, quickly abandoned him. The luxury she had envisioned, the prestige, control, and influence, was gone, leaving only a man stripped of power and status. Her smiles, whispers, and promises vanished as she disappeared from his life, exposing the fragility of alliances built on ego and material gain. Ethan was left to confront the full extent of his isolation, no friends to support him, no mistress to defend him, and no family willing to trust him with authority again. In the silence of his now empty office, Ethan faced a crushing awareness of loss. The wealth he had assumed was his, the control he had believed unassailable, and the family legacy he had taken for granted, all were slipping beyond his grasp. Regret settled like a heavy fog, enveloping him in the cold understanding that some mistakes could never be undone. Every decision, every betrayal, every moment of arrogance had led him here. As he stared out at the city skyline, it no longer inspired pride but served as a reminder of everything he had lost, and of the quiet, calculating woman who had orchestrated his downfall with patience, precision, and undeniable power. Amelia stood in the quiet of her office, the soft morning light reflecting off the polished surfaces, and felt a calm she had not known in months. Her focus was no longer on the chaos she had orchestrated or the man who had underestimated her, it was entirely on the life growing within her. Every decision she made, every move she considered, was guided by a single purpose: to ensure the safety, well-being, and future of her unborn child. Motherhood had always been a part of her identity, but now it intertwined seamlessly with the power she had quietly amassed, giving her a clarity and strength that even Ethan could never comprehend. She reclaimed her name not as a gesture of defiance, but as a statement of independence. Amelia was no longer defined by her marriage, by societal expectations, or by the illusions of wealth and power she had once hidden. Her identity was wholly her own, forged through patience, intelligence, and resilience. Each contract she signed, each boardroom decision she made, reflected her autonomy and vision, establishing her not just as a mother but as a formidable leader in the corporate world. Her strength radiated in both subtle and undeniable ways. Where others might have sought revenge, Amelia chose peace, understanding that the true measure of power lay in composure, foresight, and moral authority. She allowed Ethan's downfall to unfold without interference, knowing that his humiliation was a consequence of his own arrogance. Her focus remained forward, her eyes fixed on building a life that was defined not by bitterness but by opportunity, dignity, and the promise of a future she could shape entirely on her own terms. Even as she navigated complex business decisions, Amelia maintained an unwavering commitment to her child, balancing leadership with nurture, strategy with compassion. The lessons of betrayal and underestimation had strengthened her, but they had not hardened her heart. She embraced her dual roles with grace, demonstrating that true power could coexist with empathy and foresight. In reclaiming her legacy, her independence, and her role as a mother, Amelia embodied the ultimate resolution of the story: a woman who chose purpose over pride, peace over vengeance, and a future shaped by her own strength and wisdom rather than the errors and arrogance of others. The story of Ethan Blackwood and Amelia serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of arrogance and the consequences of underestimating those who appear quiet or unassuming. Ethan's pride, cultivated over a lifetime of perceived entitlement and social validation, blinded him to truths that were plain to everyone else. He believed that wealth, status, and appearance could secure loyalty and control, and in doing so, he ignored the quiet strength that lay beneath Amelia's calm exterior. His misjudgment was not born of malice alone but of a sense of superiority, a conviction that those around him could never match his ambition or foresight. Betrayal, in Ethan's case, acted as both catalyst and veil. He convinced himself that the path he chose, divorcing his pregnant wife for a mistress, was the route to personal and social triumph. Yet, in embracing temptation, he became blind to the reality that Amelia's power was not only real but absolute. Her silence, composure, and patience were not signs of weakness, they were strategic, deliberate, and inexorably linked to the eventual reckoning he would face. Time and again, history demonstrates that those who forsake loyalty and underestimate the strength of others often pay a price far greater than they anticipate. Amelia's actions, by contrast, reveal the subtle potency of hidden strength. She chose restraint over retaliation, intelligence over impulse, and patience over pride. Every step she took, every move she orchestrated, was measured and deliberate, reinforcing the notion that true power often resides not in ostentation or brash action but in strategy, awareness, and moral authority. Her pregnancy, her calm demeanor, and her silent influence were the perfect counterbalance to Ethan's reckless arrogance, highlighting a timeless truth: those who act with integrity and foresight rarely need to declare their power, it manifests naturally and inevitably. The moral of this story resonates far beyond boardrooms and social circles. Those who abandon loyalty for fleeting temptation, who allow pride and arrogance to cloud judgment, often destroy themselves without ever realizing it. Ethan's downfall was not merely the result of Amelia's revelation, it was the inevitable consequence of his own choices, decisions made in the illusion of control, and an underestimation of a strength he could not perceive. In the end, the lesson is clear: humility, respect, and awareness of the hidden capacities of those around us are far more valuable than the empty pursuit of vanity, desire, or immediate gratification. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.